There are sounds that kill. Not because they're loud, but because they haven't happened yet. One man built a machine to record the future, and what he captured was the sound of the end, starting with his own. There is a law that holds the world together, a sequence so fundamental that our sanity is staked upon it. Cause, then effect. The impact, then the noise. The lightning, then the thunder. This is the metronome of reality, but we are here to discuss a place where that metronome broke. A damp, suffocating basement in Tacoma, Washington, in the autumn of 1998, where an audio engineer named Elias Vance taught a machine to listen to tomorrow. And in doing so, he recorded a prophecy that is still unfolding today. The official story is neat and tragic. You can read it in Police Report 98-442B. It describes a freelancer, a recluse, who suffered a psychotic break fueled by isolation and starved to death. His body was found surrounded by a king's ransom in audio equipment, a silent testament to a brilliant mind gone dark. But official stories are for closure, not for truth. The truth is locked away in an evidence locker, designated Exhibit C, a heavily modified Nagra IV-S reel-to-reel tape recorder, and beside it, 13 reels of magnetic tape that contain the most terrifying sounds ever recorded by man. We are not here to dissect the tragedy of Elias Vance's death. We are here to understand the horror of his life's final work, because the sounds on those tapes, the sounds he listened to in his last weeks, were not random noise. Forensic analysis, conducted years later in sterile, brightly lit labs, confirmed a chilling impossibility. The sounds were recorded in his apartment, but not at the time the machine was running. They were echoes from the future. To understand what he did, you must first understand his obsession. Vance wasn't just an audio engineer. He was a purist, a fanatic chasing an impossible ghost. Absolute silence. His basement apartment wasn't a home. It was a sensory deprivation chamber, a tomb of black acoustic foam and heavy baffles designed to murder any stray sound wave. His diary, found open on his workbench, is a labyrinth of frantic schematics, complex equations, and a handwriting that decays page by page into a primal scrawl. He wrote of his quest to modify the Nagra recorder, to push its capabilities beyond its design. He wanted to capture what he called the ghost signal. Not the whispers of the dead, but the magnetic residue of events, the faint signature that sound leaves on the fabric of space-time. On the night of October 14th, 1998, he succeeded. He had rewired the bias oscillator, forcing a cascade of overvoltage into the recording head, making it sensitive to fluctuations a normal machine would dismiss as static. His logbook entry for that night is written with the steady, precise hand of a scientist on the verge of a Nobel Prize, completely devoid of the terror that should have accompanied it. It reads, 11:42 p.m., device activated. Ambient noise floor is negligible. Room is silent. Playback, however, playback indicates heavy traffic noise, a downpour of rain, and the distinct acoustic signature of shattering glass. Checked meteorological reports. Current weather conditions. Sky is clear. Local streets are silent. He had captured an anomaly, a ghost, but he didn't grasp the true nature of the recording until the following afternoon. At precisely 5:24 p.m. on October 15th, 17 hours and 42 minutes, after he stopped the tape, the sky over Tacoma broke open. A sudden, violent thunderstorm erupted, slicking the roads with a treacherous film of water. Outside his basement window, the hiss of tires grew loud as a delivery truck skidded, its horn blaring in a brief, panicked cry. Startled by the sound, Elias Vance, standing in his own kitchen, dropped a glass of water. It shattered on the linoleum floor. The sound was sharp, final, and familiar. Imagine that moment, the blood draining from his face. The sudden, icy realization. He would have stumbled back to his recording deck, his hands trembling as he threaded the tape. He hits play, and there it is, the rumble of the truck, the patter of the rain he hadn't heard yet, and the crystal-clear, high-fidelity recording of the glass that was, until a moment ago, still whole in his hand. The machine hadn't just predicted the future. It had reached into it, stolen its sound, and pulled it back through a 17-hour chasm in time to be imprinted on a strip of magnetic plastic. He gave it a name, a clinical, sterile name to mask the cosmic horror of his discovery, the Temporal Delay Interval. A consistent 17 hours and 42 minutes. Any rational person would have taken a sledgehammer to the machine. They would have burned the tapes, buried the ashes, and moved to a new city. But Elias Vance was not a rational person. He was a scientist, a pioneer. The human impulse to know, to see what lies beyond the curtain, is a siren's call. And so, he continued to experiment. He left the recorder running. The documentation from this point forward unravels. The clinical observations give way to jagged, fearful notes. We have the transcript from tape 4, recorded on October 20th. The reel runs for 45 minutes. For the first 10, there is only the low, electric hum of the device itself, the sound of engineered silence. Then a new sound pierces the quiet, a telephone ringing. On the tape, you can hear the frantic scuffling of a chair, and then Vance's own voice, thin and reedy with terror. He's screaming into a phone that hasn't rung yet, begging someone, pleading with them not to visit. "Don't come over," the voice on the tape yells. "The stairs aren't safe. For God's sake, Sarah, don't use the stairs." The recording ends there, an abrupt click. 17 hours later, as the interval dictated, the event occurred. His sister, Sarah, worried about his increasing isolation, came to check on him. The building's external wooden staircase, weakened by the autumn rain, had rotted. One of the steps gave way under her weight. She fell. She broke her leg. Elias, however, never made that phone call. He never screamed that warning. Because in his reality, the phone never rang. He had heard the recording of himself trying to prevent the future. Paralyzed by the knowledge, he did nothing. He just waited. He waited for a phone call that was never destined to come. And instead, through his soundproofed walls, he heard the muffled, real-world scream of his sister as she fell. This is where the true horror of his discovery begins to crystallize. The machine wasn't a crystal ball. It wasn't showing him a possible future he could alter. It was recording a future that was immutable, a destiny carved in stone. Or worse, it was recording a timeline that he actively erased simply by listening to it. The universe, it seemed, demanded balance. It was a self-correcting system. The consequence, the injury, had to happen. The sound had been ordained. If the warning call was averted, then the stairs themselves would have to break. The potential energy of the disaster had to be released, one way or another. By early November, Vance was a prisoner in his own home, a ghost haunted by futures that hadn't happened. He stopped sleeping. His diary entries speak of living his life 17 hours ahead of himself, listening to the day's events on tape before they transpired. Can you conceive of the psychological torture? Waking up, your hands shaking so badly you can barely make coffee, and then putting on a pair of headphones to find out if you're going to die that evening. Listening for the sound of your own screams. This brings us to tape 9, recorded on November 12th. Of all the evidence, this is the most profoundly disturbing. Even listening to the digitized file today, it feels unclean. The audio quality is poor, choked with static and a deep, throbbing low-frequency hum. Experts suggest this was the sound of the magnetic tape itself being physically warped, stretched to its breaking point by the impossible signal it was being forced to contain. On tape 9, there are no voices, no traffic, no breaking glass. There is only the sound of something wet and biological. The sound of tearing meat. A thick, rhythmic pulling apart of soft tissue. Beneath it, the sound of heavy, labored, liquid breathing. And a constant, wet thudding. A slow, relentless beat against a hard surface. The recording lasts for 3 hours. We know Vance listened to it. His fingerprints, slick with sweat, were found on the play, rewind, and stop buttons. He must have played it over and over. He sat in his silent bunker, listening to an explicit, visceral recording of what sounded like a brutal, bloody slaughter scheduled to take place in his apartment in exactly 17 hours. He did the only thing he could. He prepared for war. He dragged his heaviest furniture against the door, barricading it. He nailed thick planks of wood over the single, small window. He took the largest knife from his kitchen and he waited. He sat in the dark, clutching the knife, listening for the footsteps of the intruder, for the source of that terrible sound. But no one came. The 17-hour interval passed in suffocating silence. The police timeline confirms it. At the exact moment, the recorded